and welcome to episode 2 of Deep Weird. I am Jacob Pittman, and today I have probably one of the densest interviews we did for this show. We are going to be talking to a guy who goes by the name online, Resident Eccentric. Just to clear up some confusion on that, the previous thing that I did on the internet was very video game focused, so when I sent out my call for people to send in their stories, the audience that I had access to was heavily weighted in the direction of nerds on the internet. And nerds on the internet love their privacy and anonymity, so there will be a couple people in this series that are going by sort of an online handle. Eccentric has had a lifelong experience being, for lack of a better word, haunted by what appears to be the same female being. So we're going to get to hear all about that, and we are also going to get to hear Eccentric's mom's version of the story, which is very great and reveals a lot of additional info and corroborates a lot of very interesting things about this story. And without wasting any more time, here is the man himself.
I go by Resident Eccentric online. Rather new YouTuber, but in terms of side interests, I do D&D weekly. I'm a forever DM. Job, I've done audio engineering, editing, mostly computer stuff. A couple of the typical stocking shelves and stuff before then, but nothing too big yet.
You emailed me with a couple of stories, but the one that caught my attention the most, and I think the one that is sort of the most interesting from the perspective of talking about it on this podcast, is you have been seeing what appears to be the sort of ghost of a woman for like literally decades.
Yeah. Or
close to it. I don't know exactly how old you are, but based on how you described it, somewhere between like 15 to 20 years.
Yes. I'm in my mid-20s now, and I've been experiencing it since I was a toddler. So
basically, as long as you have memories
sentience,
formed,
yeah.
you've been seeing this, whatever this thing is.
Correct, yes.
Let's start with the earliest one that you can remember, and then kind of work down the list of times that you saw her where it stood out. And then we'll kind of work our way up to current day, which is going to be a lot, but I kind of like to stay out of the way in these interviews. So from this point forward, I'm just going to let you like ramble.
I will clarify that the last couple of years, the last 5 years or so, it has been lesser. It was mostly throughout my younger years up until my teenage years. And then since then it's dissipated. But I still do see her occasionally, mostly after waking up. But to start, I'm not sure what the earliest would be. My parents claimed that they were used to hearing me talking about it. The lady in my room or the lady in my closet. That's what I called her. Typically, we stuck with the lady in my closet because it sounded like she was talking always from my closet. And every single time, it was never malicious or anything bad. It was always sort of a comforting thing, though sometimes it did terrify me, mainly whenever I got older. They, and my grandmother as well, all believe more or less that this happened. But the earliest memory I can think of that stands out as an actual story was I was sleeping one night, and I'm very close to my mom, always have been. And whenever I was 4 or 5, I want to say, I woke up late in the night, probably like 12 to 3. And for some reason, I had this overwhelming sense to go and find my mom as like a safety net. Don't know why. I guess I was just sort of freaked out. Felt like something was wrong. And I walked out of my room and passed into the dining room. And from the dining room, you can see the kitchen beyond it. And there's it's called an island, the table in the kitchen in the center. And I I saw the figure of a woman standing there. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks of how I describe it. This is more or less like, it was more like the outline of a person than an actual person, almost like a smudge. But it was still real enough for me to believe. And the kitchen lights were entirely off, but somehow in the darkness, I could see the outline of a woman, and my young mind thought it was my mom. And so I kept calling for her. And there was no audio response, but the figure sort of stood up, I guess. Maybe straightened their back. I don't know how to describe it. Instead of leaning on the table, they sort of backed off, and they seemed to acknowledge me, sort of turned towards me. And from then, I saw them walk to the door, and then just sort of the shadow, I guess, combined, disappeared, whatever you want to call it. And I opened the door and I ran outside screaming for my mom because I thought that's who it was. And then my parents freak out and come out to like a 4-year-old outside in the road screaming. That's the biggest early memory I can remember, but there were very smaller ones too of... I had, in general, I have a lot of sleep problems. When I was younger, I had sleep paralysis a lot. And I would wake up frozen, and I would hear a voice that was more rugged and older sounding than my grandmother, but still a similar profile to her voice. Say my name, my first name, and then just simply, I love you. Resident Eccentric, I love you. And then I would eventually get out of the paralysis, and then I'd just sort of be there. Sometimes it didn't even scare me. I just sort of fell back to sleep, or just stood up, or stayed up, rather, calmly.
Let me go back a little bit here.
Sure.
So, in the beginning, obviously you're really young, so you don't remember much, but you would talk about, like, did you actually, like, see a similar shadow figure, like, in your closet as a kid, or was it, like, a vibe?
Okay. I saw it as a kid, but usually it was just a vibe. Typically, the way that I would see it, I guess to explain my bed situation, square, one corner of the square is my bed, and then right beside that corner is a door into it, and then there's a desk opposite that on the other side. And so I would sleep next to the door to my closet. And I would hear something in there or feel something. Then as a kid, I'd open it up, close the door, and be in complete darkness. And then I swore to myself that I could see the outline of her. But her speaking and like actually moving was typically always whenever I was asleep and waking up, or deep in the night. Whenever I was younger, like I said, I wasn't scared of her, so I would actually go seeking for her for sometimes. I'd just stand in my room with the lights turned off, and same with the closet, and I would swear that I'd see her. But those I do believe less than the other encounters I've had, where I've actually directly heard and seen her. But yeah, I'd say it's safe to say that younger me saw that sort of outline, but younger me certainly heard it very, very young.
It almost seems like it starts kind of slow and then sort of has like a ramping effect over time. Because it starts off... Well, I just want to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly.
Sure.
Because I don't want to like narrativize the experience here. So it sounds like you sort of like start to notice this shape.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to kind of go out of your way to look around for this shape. And then it escalates to you're walking around in the kitchen at night and that shape is now like in a completely different area.
Interesting. I've never actually thought of it that way. I guess I just sort of kept the individual experiences separate. But I think that could be a way to describe it. I couldn't tell you exactly if that's how it was.
At what point do you think you started hearing the voice? Or was that always a component of
always.
it? Like as far as you remember?
Always. Okay. That was even before I had seen it. It's just that there isn't an individual story for that, which is why I went to the shadow. But yeah, I'd say the voice component of it came before I saw it. There were many other encounters. It got so bad that my family sort of made sure that whenever I was like halfway sleepwalking, that I couldn't run outside just to my boxers or pajamas, because it became very regular once a week or so. I was a sleepwalker as a kid too. I'd go to sleep in my room and then wake up like on the couch or like in someone else's room. There was another time where I'd woken up again, sort of freaked out. And I'd went out, and instead of the kitchen, I had this feeling that my mom was on the porch, and again I went outside. But that time I do remember the figure. Like I said, it would regard me and then it would disappear. Basically, it would sort of respond to my thing and then leave. But I remember this time it stayed for a very long time, and I have a memory of just sort of outside in my like pajamas. Late at night, just standing there with this figure, and just sort of, I guess, like, regarding that it was there beside me. I don't know how to describe it. It sounds weird to bring it up, but yeah, like, I just sort of stayed there for a moment. I wasn't freaked out by it. And then, again, it just sort of dissipated. That time wasn't me getting freaked out. I actually remember going back inside and going back to sleep calmly. Whenever I got older, though, is whenever it started to freak me out. My dad passed away whenever I was very young, and I sort of had a big crisis go on, spiritual, religious crisis, I guess. And I mean, it was already in my teenage years, early teenage years, so most kids usually have that too. And so I started getting really freaked out about these memories, because I mean, it was usual for me. I'd bring it up to my friends where they stayed over, and they'd claim that they saw her, though that might have just been kids getting freaked out because I was suggesting it to them. But it was common enough that like all my friend group knew about the lady in the closet. Like we would even jokingly lock each other in there. I only ever actually saw her and heard her, but became like a common neighborhood story because of me. But yeah, whenever I was in my early teens, I started getting more scared about it. My parents were already freaked out about it, but I guess I started thinking that it was demonic, because I started being really Christian, and I thought that it was something malicious, something bad, and so I just didn't like it anymore, I guess. I mean, it's almost like an imaginary friend, I guess, going from like an innocence to being older and sort of like but
so when you were younger you didn't really have any context for it, so you didn't have any reason to be scared.
Exactly.
But then you said after your dad dies you have sort of a crisis, and was that part of the reason that you turned to Christianity, or were you vaguely Christian the entire time?
I was vaguely Christian the entire time, then I doubled down. It's funny, though, because I went from the most Christian in my life to being, like, hyper edgy, like, middle school atheist. And I'm still there. I'm still, like, agnostic. I don't believe in Christianity anymore. But whenever my dad died, I, like, really doubled down on it. And something that always terrified me, because my parents put it into me, was being scared of possession and stuff like that. Like, they were like, if you ever watch The Exorcist, it'll bring demons into the house. Like, shit like that. So I grew up thinking The Exorcist was, like, the scariest movie ever made. And anything that just widely involved spirits was satanic and evil. But again, as a kid, I didn't regard it that way. But then whenever I got very Christian, I did. And I was like, whoa, this isn't right. And it started scaring me every time it happened. And it scared me so much, and scared my parents so much, that despite the fact that we were Baptist, they got a Catholic priest, if I remember correctly, while I was away at school one day. And I suppose now I should say my family more or less accepts that the lady in the closet that I saw was my great-grandmother, who passed away a little before I was born, but she knew that my mom was pregnant, and she had a very similar voice to my grandmother's, etc. I never met her, but that's more or less what my family believes it is.
Why don't you go through some of sort of the teenage experiences that when this stuff started to freak you out?
I remember to be honest, it was just mostly the sleep paralysis, and I'd wake up and hear it from my right side, which is towards the closet, and I would hear a voice say that she loved me. But I remember being frozen, absolutely, and like being completely terrified of this concept and idea of like evil around me and possibly possessing me, that I tried so hard to get out of like that paralysis state, and I just couldn't. And I kept feeling like I was, I guess, sinking into my bed a bit. And the presence still stayed there. I could feel her off to the right, and feeling that sort of weight, I guess, kept dragging me. There wasn't any other things that she said or things that she did. It was just simply her being there. And likewise, I have so many memories that only recently I uncovered, actually, whenever I messaged you, of laying in bed whenever I was like 10 to 13, 14. And I would always face the wall while sleeping, because I could feel her towards the closet off of the right side of the bed. And they would just terrify me. And I guess, like, to describe how it felt, I mean, I think everyone's experienced the like feeling of you being watched, but it's like that, but 100 times more, I guess. I don't know, that isn't as flowery or great as I'd like to describe it, but it feels like there's, in your mindscape, I guess, a black hole, almost. Just something overwhelming. Even if it isn't there, it feels like it's in the back of your mind. And I remember sleeping, and just being totally freaked out by that feeling, and I would just stay in bed. Even if I had to pee really bad or something, I would just face the wall and never turn around for fear of seeing or hearing it. And I do think it's possible that that this was something else entirely. Because I've had other sleep paralysis where I felt other presences like that. There wasn't much beyond that. I'm sorry, I don't have any like story of like something more sinister happening. It was just more or less a tonal change in me, I guess.
The way that you describe it is that you would have these like feelings and stuff during the sleep paralysis episodes. But even when you weren't in sleep paralysis, like just pretty much every night when you were going to bed, you had every those feelings before. Did you like see the figure during this time?
Yes. Every time that I would turn around, I would swear that I could see it. And again, it wasn't an actual, like, I guess I wouldn't describe it as 3D. It was basically just a black splotch that I could make out inside the darkness. So there was never any detail. There was never any, like, face I could make out or anything. It was just essentially a part of the room feeling darker, I guess, is how I describe it. It is worth noting, I was diagnosed with OCD whenever I was young, and because of that, I always like to be a bit of a skeptic, so I'm sorry if that's like pulling down my story a little bit, but I sort of double down on intrusive thoughts. So I think that my dad dying really did send me into a crisis, and regardless of if she was there or not, I had just more or less convinced myself that she was bad, and so I would double down and maybe imagine she wasn't there, or she was there whenever she wasn't, because I intrusive thoughts and just sort of convincing myself of it. But there are times, definitely, even when I was a kid, that I do swear it did actually happen, because it just was overwhelming, and I remember the fear just like clear as day. In terms of like modern day things, it genuinely has went down from whenever I was a kid, at least once a week, and I mean, hell, whenever I was a preteen, like I said, almost every night, to at this point, it's only once every couple of years, and I'll have a brief thing of sleep paralysis, and hear her. And then I'll wake up and I'm not freaked out by it anymore. I've just sort of accepted it, I guess. Like, in the moment, my heart will be racing whenever I'm, like, frozen, but whenever I'm not, there's a sort of sense of goodness, I guess. Like, it usually makes me stay up the rest of the night. If I wake up at 4 a.m., I'm just up. But it stopped terrifying me. I'm going to say around, like, 16 to 17 to present.
Typically now, you said that you're seeing it during, like, when you wake up, right?
Yes.
You said that you'll just wake up and, like, see it. Are you still having, like, the sleep paralysis events?
Yes. I whenever I was, I want to say 16 to 20, I had a lot of sleep paralysis. And I would have lucid dreaming where I knew that I was asleep, but I couldn't, wake up from it. And that still happens occasionally. I'd say that I have a bout of sleep paralysis or, like, sleep problems in general in terms of, like, the dreams or fear, like, once every couple of months at this point, and maybe when it's very bad, a cluster of them, of, like, 6 or 7 a month if it's really bad.
I'm assuming that you've moved around a lot since all this stuff has happened, right?
Yeah.
You haven't been living in one house. So now when you sort of wake up and see this figure, like, what part of the room is it in?
It's always, if I'm laying in my bed, it is the rightmost corner. So the corner, again, if it's just a regular square, let's say that my bed is bottom left, the top right corner, is typically where it is. That is quite a bit different, because before it was just beside my bed on the right, but now it's beyond the foot of my bed, just in a corner distinct. And with those, I can make out, again, in those blotches, a brief shape. I mentioned before that the other one was always in the shape of a woman, and one that I always assumed to be my mom, shaped like my mom. And I've had other... I know the popular term is sleep paralysis demons. I've had other sleep paralysis demons that I've seen in the corner. I'd say the most recurring one is, I mean, to be honest, it's a rather tall man with broad set shoulders, and I do almost always envision him as if he's wearing, like, a suit, to be honest, like the fucking the Talking Heads guy with the big suit on. But another one as well is the shape of a little girl, and that and the suited man always terrified me, and still does. That the last time that happened was 2 or 3 years ago. To be honest, I've gotten better about the sleep issues in the last couple of years.
So it seems like you recognize the difference between when you're seeing stuff during a sleep paralysis episode and when you're seeing stuff outside of a sleep paralysis episode.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, because I've just walked around before in the dark. It's almost always in my childhood home, where I see something in the dark. And honestly, in my childhood home, it's everywhere. I've seen it in the kitchen, the laundry room, my closet, my room, my parents' room.
And with the shadow that you feel is in a suit and the other one that you feel is like a little girl, are those exclusively during the sleep paralysis episodes?
Yes, I've never seen that around my house.
So this woman-shaped shadow seems to be both in the sleep paralysis and outside of the sleep paralysis.
Yes. And because of that, I do sort of put her separate aside from that, because the sleep paralysis stuff I can sort of ignore, but the fact that I've seen and heard her whenever there wasn't sleep paralysis, like just whenever I was waking up or just before I went to bed, and the fact that I've seen what it feels like the same presence, it is definitely distinct, yeah, which almost makes me think, it does make me feel like maybe she was comforting me / protecting me whenever I was going to have a worse sleep paralysis, maybe. That's sort of how I guess I've defined it for myself now, because it is less terrifying than the other times.
When did the figure of this woman transition back into not being scary anymore?
Yeah.
Because you were, as a kid, it wasn't scary, and then in your teenage years, you were terrified of it, and now as an adult, it's no longer scary.
Yeah, I would say that it was, whenever I was 17 on, I want to say maybe 16, because I sort of had a spiritual reawakening, I guess. I went from militant atheist, anything spiritual, anything religious is automatically wrong, to sort of opening my horizons a bit. And because of that, it made me recount the things I've experienced in my life and sort of diagnose, I don't know if that's the right word, to examine them and see if I believed that they were either real, and if they were real, if they were bad, good, or something in the middle. And I guess in my own just re-examining, it made it better for me. And whenever it did happen, from that point on, I could find myself reassuring myself. But it was especially because during that time I started having the really bad I became scared of going to sleep to dream, honestly, because I would end up getting trapped in my own dreams, which really fucked with me. And so, like, the act of waking up was far less scary to me than sleeping, I guess, from that point on. Because I would just... I've never been able to have, like, a lucid dream where I actually... Like, people talk about flying around like Superman and shit, but for me, it is just simply, oh, I'm asleep and I can't do anything about it. And typically that turns to, like, things within the dream trying to, like, kill me or kick me out of it. It's like me being aware of it makes my own subconscious attack itself, I guess. And so the act of waking up, yeah, it stopped being as scary as the actual sleeping part. That led to a whole thing of me being a sleeper during the daytime, because waking up with the with light outside like made me feel better. Luckily, I've gotten better from that, sought help and stuff. But yeah, for my late teen years, it was me sleeping was a very unhealthy relationship. And yeah, I guess it just made me recontextualize it along with my own, I guess, philosophical reclamation.
Was there an event that sort of made you go back and do this, like, spiritual inventory where you sort of, like, sat down and went back and looked at stuff and thought, like, rethought things to get out of the atheist phase? Or is that just, like, was that just the evolution of your philosophy sort of, like, naturally?
I think, to be honest, it's just as simple as leaving the nest and, like, making lots of friends and, like, sort of being like, oh shit, well, you know, I have friends who are Christian, and while I may not like that, they're good people. Oh, I've never really thought about Islam, but I have a friend that's Muslim, and what do you know? And then I started making a lot of friends, to be honest, like hippie friends who are very into, like, modern day paganism and stuff. And that just made me, like, become comfortable with it again. Because I went from, like I said, being scared of anything satanic, quote unquote, and being ultra Christian, to hating Christianity and everything about it, to this sort of middle ground where I sort of, I don't know if like all of it is the right word, but I'm tolerant of all of it, and I like sort of delving into it and figuring out what I like from it, and realizing that people that are into it can be any variation of good or bad. So yeah, just broadening my own horizons, I guess. There wasn't necessarily like an event that happened that made me more spiritual. It was just sort of my own exploration. Because I just started experimenting with it. Got very into, like, Taoism, stuff like that. Like I said, I still categorize myself as agnostic, but I've become more spiritual from, like, 18 to now. And in terms of the specific story you're wanting to focus in on, whenever I was 20, I had that experience again, and I was calm from her saying that she loved me and me sort of waking up frozen the entire time.
Oh, wait, which experience did you have again when you were 20?
I had the lady in the closet show up and wake me up and maybe frozen for a moment while she says my name clearly and I love you. To be honest, at that point, it hadn't happened since I was like 16. So I was almost convincing myself that it was just childhood and teenage years delusions. But whenever I was 20, I had another encounter with her, and it was mostly calm the entire way through. There's the initial panic of being frozen, and then once I heard the voice, it soothed me, and I was like, well, shit. I guess it is actually totally, entirely real, because it's happening again. It's happened again since then, 3 or 4 times. It's been 2 years now, though, since the last time that it happened. But there's a cluster in my early 20s of her appearing again, and every time I wasn't scared.
And is it the same thing every time?
Yes, yes. It is always a repeat of Resident Eccentric, I love you. And then just sort of, I'll stay there and I'll feel her for a moment, and then it'll go. It's always that. There's nothing else happens, at least in my memory. There's no other like conversation that happens, no other word said. It's always that exact same thing.
Have you ever thought about doing some sort of like meditative practice or like something along those lines? Not to try to like, I don't want to use the word contact because that like isn't what I'm trying to say here, but like sort of like working like with it to try to figure out like if you can intuit anything else about this thing.
That's interesting. I haven't, but I have done meditation and stuff with other things I've had. With my lucid dreaming, I've sort of focused on some very frightening ones and sort of meditated and like searched through it. And my friend talks about that a lot. But I haven't with this specific thing, no. But now that I'm starting to talk about it more, I think I'd be open to it. To be honest, I have like cluster thoughts. Like I can't think like basic enough to fully meditate. I know that for a lot of people they say just keep trying, but I've always struggled with it because I just have like 10-12 thoughts going at once anytime I try and meditate.
Now that we've sort of covered this broad history of seeing this thing, what is your theory on what is going on here? Because it is odd that it seemed to have a presence both inside and outside of the sleep paralysis events. And and it was unique that was the only thing that seemed to do that.
Sure. In my family, more or less, it's accepted that there's my great-grandmother, because she lived here and passed away a little before I was born. But I'd say that is what I've classified it as, is if not her directly, then just something that for whatever reason has taken a loving interest of me, I guess. A great-grandmother certainly fills that role well, that never got to see me born. And it makes sense. But I've never really like treated it that way. Like whenever I think of my great-grandmother and she's like brought up and pictures are shown, I don't really think of her as that, interestingly enough. And like I said, the figure to me felt completely like my mom. And my great-grandmother is on my dad's side, not my mom's side. So that's something that's always thrown a wrench into it. Because it was just one-for-one same aura as my mom. More or less. Different, obviously, but every time I saw it, I would think of my mom. So I think I've just sort of categorized it as something that's benevolent, whether it has control over itself or not, that cares about me, I guess. I don't know if that's egotistical to say, but I mean, it does just simply say that it loves me. If I had to like write down on a piece of paper, I'd say that it was my great-grandmother, and if not her, then some spirit or another, whether it was once human or not, that seems to have an interest in my well-being spiritually and not being freaked out from bad dreams or sleep paralysis or whatever else.
Did your great-grandma die in your childhood house?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. And she knew that your mom was pregnant at the time.
Yes, she died. I think it was 3 months before I was born, and we didn't move in to this house until I was 3 or 4, which lines up with my memory of seeing her. I have no memory of our first house because I was very young. But this is one of my family houses. It's been in my line of family on my dad's side. For a long time. There's another house across town that my uncle lives in that dates back to the Civil War. This house is newer though, but the plot has always been to my family. But yeah, she died 3 months, I want to say, before I was born, and she knew for sure that my mom was pregnant. And from what I've been told, she was a good grandmother, but a bad mother, which seems to be a common thing. So I never met her, but the other cousins that I had that met her said that she was lovely to them.
So obviously different members of your family and like friends and stuff remember you at least like telling the story.
Yes.
But did anybody in the house... I mean, obviously you said that like your friends as kids and stuff would say it, they saw it, but like who knows how reliable of narrators they are. Did anybody did your mom or your dad ever like visually see this thing?
Yes. I brought it up to my mom recently, so I have a couple of things I can say from that. She said that she remembered showering late at night one time and seeing like a clear figure. I guess like what's the movie? Maniac? Is that the movie?
Psycho.
Psycho. That's the word. Oh man, I'm gonna get grilled for that. But like a sort of figure beyond the bathroom, sort of seeing it past the curtains, and likewise, the thing that stuck out to me is that she said that it felt sort of wrong to her and that she remembered feeling something, like touch her head while she was in the shower too. That doesn't sound anything like this specific thing to me, because there was never any physical touching for me, but she's had encounters that she deems as supernatural. But for this figure, she said that she would always remember feeling a presence similar to mine, of a woman in their room, sort of, again, I guess let's say their bedroom is a square, their bed is in the top right, they would feel her in the top left, sort of standing there, and she said that there were nights where she couldn't sleep because she felt like there was something there, and she would look over, and she said that 2 or 3 times she actually did see more or less what I said, of just a darker splotch in the darkness, in the shape of a woman. And likewise, my grandmother, who lived in this house too, she said that she also felt it in her room at the foot of her bed, and would see a woman there. So my entire household growing up had experienced it somewhat, but I was the person who experienced it the most. My grandmom just outright, whenever she talks about it, because I asked her recently too, just outright believes that it's her mother, and says, "Oh yeah, I saw her, and oh yeah, she was there. She was always around you, even though she wasn't alive and stuff like that."
Okay, so do you have any other like sort of closing thoughts here?
Not that I can think of much. I suppose, I guess just to give something, I feel relatively calm on it now. I don't feel like it was anything malicious or bad. The other sleep paralysis stuff obviously terrified me, but this figure, this woman, never, or rather, it did scare me, but that was only due to myself. I feel like whatever she is, whatever she was. Is something that is, I guess, good is the word I want to use. I believe that whatever it was just had good intentions. I know for sure that I 100% believe that it happened to me and that I experienced it. There's no denying that. And I think that personal experience is really all that matters in these paranormal things, whenever there's not really a scientific way to prove it. It really is just based on, I guess to a certain extent, belief. And my belief is that it happened. and it wasn't necessarily malicious or bad. Yeah.
This next segment is an interview that Eccentric conducted with his mom. Normally, I wouldn't want to task somebody who's not involved with the show at all with doing some sort of an interview. I would much rather get a feel for the person I'm talking to and do it myself. But Eccentric has a lot of experience with sort of audio and video production. I could tell just talking to him in our interview that he was going to do a good job, and I came to the conclusion that it was worth making an exception to get his mom's side of the story. This interview has a ton of surprising information. It corroborates so much stuff. It adds so much additional sort of information and nuance, and it really just puts a bow on top of this entire story. With that being said, here is Eccentric's interview with his mom.
Hello. Just for the sake of people on the internet, who are you?
I'm Mom.
Yeah, I guess that's an answer. This is weird. This is very strange, yes. So, for the second question, since you have introduced yourself, I guess just as a general starter, since it's the topic of the podcast, do you believe in the paranormal?
Yes, I believe in the paranormal.
And are you just sort of predisposed to that? 'Cause, I mean, we're in the South. South is fairly superstitious. Or is it because you've had your own encounters?
I've had my own encounters. Several encounters.
Would you say that the house that I grew up in, would you say that it itself was paranormal?
Yes, it is. There's been a few things that's happened here.
What are some experiences that you can think of off the top of your head about things that have happened in my childhood home?
Used to when you would go to sleep when you were younger, your dad and I would go outside and we would just talk so we wouldn't wake you up, but we had a monitor and we could see you and stuff. So we would sit and talk to each other, and I would look up because I would hear a noise on the monitor or something, and there would be something that looked like it had walked through the living room into the kitchen, and I could see that through the windows on the porch because we have a really big porch window. And so your dad or I or both of us would get up to go check on you and see if you were hungry or wanted something to eat or what was going on. And so we would get up and there would be nothing there. You would be sound asleep, and this happened several times. So yeah, and it was a little creepy each time it happened, and it would never be like in the same time or even in the same week sometimes, but it happened often enough that it kind of got really creepy.
And would you say that this figure that you saw, was it a single figure every single time, or do you think it was multiple things?
I just think it was the same figure going through. I don't think it was like multiple different figures. Yeah.
And what would you describe the figure as? Was there an outline to it? Could you see any physical detail, or was it just sort of a thing?
No, it was definitely defined. It looked more like a shadow, like a really defined shadow. That's the only way I can describe it.
Would you say that it was identifiable at all? Like someone with broad shoulders or a smaller person, or...
Well, we thought it was you. So, I mean, I guess because, like, you think you see it out of the corner of your eye, you know? But it was... I don't want to say it like, had a definite size to it. It was just something that we both saw, and we thought it was you. But I'm not sure, you know.
So it wasn't just you, other people in the house. Were there any visitors that saw it, or just the people that lived in the house?
Okay, so yes, your uncle, he would come over and visit sometimes, and he would only sit on the front porch. We would have to go outside every time he visited because he was so terrified to go in the house, because there was this one time he had to use the bathroom, and I think he went into the house by himself, and from that point on, he never went back in. He had just said he felt something and he heard something, and he just got spooked out and never came back.
The uncle that I know was a kind of tough Southern man. Like, he looked up to John Wayne and shit. Yeah, he was a Southern truck driver, and he loved John Wayne movies and things. So I mean, for him to be scared of it, I imagine that there had to be something.
Okay, you're not going to remember this at all, okay, because this was the first house we lived in, and your dad and I were fairly young, of course, and we lived in this small house, and we just had you, and there was something awful in that house. I don't know what it was, but I would hear this crackling noise on your baby monitor a lot while at night, and I would have to get up to go into your room and get you, of course, to make sure you were okay, because you would start crying immediately after that crackling noise. I would get up, and there was this long hallway in between our room and the living room to go get you in your room, and there would always be this black, just as dark as you could think of the color black shadow. It was probably 8 feet tall, 7-8 feet tall. It seemed very tall to me because I'm short anyway. But I would be so scared because it would stand at the end of this hallway, and I couldn't go through it. I felt like I couldn't go through it but my baby was crying, so of course I had to go through it. So I would run every time he would cry. I would go and run to his room through this dark shadow, and I would get goosebumps and feel like my hair was standing on end, and it was cold, and I hated it, and it just felt awful, and I don't know how else to describe it. It felt evil, wrong. So I would go get you and, calm you down and give you your milk or whatever you needed. And it got to the point where I would be so scared, and I thought maybe, it's bothering our baby. Me and your dad would talk about it. So I started sleeping on the recliner with you, and because I was so terrified that it was bothering you. And so that's what I did. I just started sleeping on the recliner, holding you at night, so you would sleep.
Yeah, and I didn't know about that because I was a toddler. I think that I wasn't even 1 year old whenever we moved, right?
Yeah, this was when you were newborn.
Yeah, I was newborn, okay. Yeah, it's interesting. That is similar to my own experiences, seeing a sort of darker than dark shadow. So that's interesting. But aside from that, specifically, do you remember whenever I was a kid and I would mention, or rather, when was the first time that I mentioned seeing things that you could consider supernatural or a ghost, and what was it?
The first time you ever said anything to me, you told me that there was a nice lady coming out of your closet, and she told you that she loved you.
The lady in the closet said that she loves me. Yeah, I remember saying that. I even remember telling it to schoolyard friends whenever I was very young. Which, of course, looking back seems very sinister, but I didn't ever think it was sinister at that age. Yeah.
There's also times where we would go on walks when you were small. I would take you and put you in your stroller and go for walks, and there was a cemetery close by, and everybody uses it for a walking trail. So I'd just push you through there. And you would always want to go say hi to Chucky. And it really freaked me out. 'Cause, I mean, there was no Chucky there that I could at least see. So sometimes you would say that Chucky said things or said hi to you or whatever while we were at the cemetery. Come to find out I'd always look while we were there to see if I could see a Charles or something, because the way you described Chucky was a small person like you at that time. And there was a baby, or toddler, I should say, that had died at 3 years old back in, I think it was like 1910, 1912. And so I had assumed that was probably the Chucky.
Yeah, I was too young for that because I don't remember the Chucky thing at all, but I've been told it before. Yeah. Aside from that, the lady in the closet, how young was I the first time I mentioned her?
I want to say you were like 3. You were very young. And she told you she loved you quite a lot. So you'd always come and tell me because you'd be playing with your little action figures or watching a Disney movie or something. And I'd be cooking or whatever. And you'd come tell me that she said something to you along the lines that she loved you or you were doing a good job or something.
That's weird, because I don't remember her saying anything aside from I love you. But I mean, I believe you, of course. It's just I don't have that memory.
She talked to you. She talked to you a lot.
Well, that's concerning. I didn't realize that it was, I realized it was somewhat often, but I didn't realize it was that often. What age did I get to where it became less common, I guess, or where I started being freaked out about it? Because when I was a kid, I wasn't freaked out about it at all, but at a certain point, I did.
There was a point when you were like 10. I could tell something was bothering you at night. You told me about like seeing shadows and things like that and noises in your room. I dropped you off at school and I came into your room with a Bible and asked it to leave you alone. And I think it did leave you alone for a while. I remember having to go through the same process again when you were 15. Because the shadows and stuff, not the lady that said she loved you was bothering you, but the shadows and stuff.
Yeah, I've always had a bad relationship with sleep, and so have you. To be frankly honest, it's probably genetic. But yeah, like I do have night terrors and sleep paralysis, and I see things at night sometimes, especially whenever I first wake up. And yeah, whenever I was 15, like I stopped sleeping during the night, basically. I would only sleep whenever it was daylight out. But okay. I guess I misremembered the story, because I thought I remembered y'all saying that y'all brought a priest in.
No, I got some holy water from a priest and kind of painted your doors and stuff with it and windows.
Where'd you get holy water from?
Just a priest. I asked for it. There was a priest that online that would...
What do you mean a priest online? Okay, I misunderstood this story.
It was like this church thing online. All I know is you can get holy water. You can get it from the River of Jordan. It's not funny. It's real.
Yes, it is funny.
It's from the River of Jordan, which is, I guess, a really holy river.
Okay, well, I misunderstood the story.
A Jewish holy river. Yeah, I don't know if they're called priests. I think they'd be more like rabbis or something. Maybe it is priests. I don't know.
So you got water from... Okay.
It worked.
It worked, she says. For a little while. Okay, I misunderstood the story because I told Jacob that I thought you like brought in a priest who did it, but okay.
No, it would be really weird if a priest in the South came in your house. He would be sending them to hell and screaming and all kinds of stuff, telling the demons to go away.
Yeah.
I don't think there are demons in here. I just think I don't know, maybe it's some kind of residual memory stuff, or And I think your sleep paralysis has a lot to do with it because, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I assume it's involved with anxiety, but yeah, my mom has had sleep paralysis quite a bit too. But it is less common now. In my late teens to my early 20s, it was very common. All right, I think I've hit the first half of these questions. How often I mentioned her, when it sort of stopped. Was there anything else as a kid I mentioned that you consider paranormal?
Not really. I mean, just the same stuff about shadows and things like that. And you really hated talking about it when you were little, because I would try to get you to talk to me about it when it started bothering you, so we could just get it out in the open, and hopefully I could understand better what was going on so I could fix it instead of, you know, but I just didn't know what to do. It's hard as a mom. You want to fix everything that's hurting your child or disturbing your child.
Now, since you've given a sort of general look at, I guess, your sort of experiences and related to the lady in the closet, I want to ask some specifics, I guess. Particularly the main thing I think of is the one night that I went outside screaming. And I'm sure that you probably remember that, but I want to hear your side of it, because I think I've proven that I'm a little bit unreliable because I was fairly young. So what was your side, and what do you remember of it? I mean, I know that you weren't awake for all of it except for the end, but what did I tell you? What did you see? All of that.
You told me, well, first, the whole story. I heard like faint screaming, I guess. You had been sleeping with us until you were 4, because, of course, the knot thing just got too bad, and so you needed sleep. And I started training you to get in your own bed when you were about 4.5, and you finally did. You were sleeping through the night. You did good. One night, I guess it wasn't so good, and you went out the front door screaming and hollering for me. You thought that I had left without you, and you were very upset about that, and you couldn't find me, and you were sad. So I had to bring you in, and I got you calmed down. We put deadbolts on the door so you couldn't get out anymore, because it was terrifying. You were kind of like sleepwalking. It was very scary.
So the full story from what I remember, and I already told Jacob, I guess, just to remind you and see if that sounds correct, because I'm sure I told you my side afterwards. So I just started going back to sleep in my room. Okay, so that matches up. But I remember waking up, and for a reason I wanted to see you, and I think I remember opening your door, and I remember saying your name, and I didn't, for whatever reason, think that I saw you in the bed. And then I went in the kitchen, and I saw the outline of a woman, but it was like a dark shadow, darker than everything else around it. And whenever I approached it, the island in the kitchen, the figure sort of regarded me, and I thought it was you, because it was sort of just a woman shape in the darkness. And I was like, Mom? And then it sort of regarded me, sort of stood straight and looked at me. And then it walked to the front door. And then that's what led to me going out, screaming for you, because I thought it was you for whatever reason. Does that sound right from what you remember me telling you?
Yes, it does, but you were also still very young, and your language wasn't as adept as it is now. So I think I thought you thought that I wasn't here, and you were scared, and it was the most terrifying thing that had definitely happened up until that point.
I suppose as a final question, we've hit most of the points. Is there anything else that you remember involving the lady in the closet, or just in general supernatural experiences in the house that you think are related to that?
I think something would like mess with your hair or touch your arm, because you would tell me that when you were younger, or your feet, because you would always want your feet covered up. Also, things like being moved and things like that when we first moved here, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be a bit of a skeptic, I guess. I think most kids are scared of their feet being outside the covers and stuff. And yeah, I do remember though feeling at night when I was sleeping that I felt like there was something looming over me or touching me or something. I do remember that. Luckily that's gone now, but yeah. Aside from that, anything else you think is related to Lady in the Closet?
I just don't really like talking about it because I don't want it to start up again. And I feel like if we acknowledge it too much, that we are going to start it up again.
Well, it's already too late, Mother.
Well, that's true, but I guess I need to get the Bible and the holy water again.
Yeah, just make sure it's from Jordan.
I'll show you. You'll see.
Never mind. Okay. Well, thank you for the interview. I think I've got everything. I do remember you telling me some other things. I think you remember saying that there was something in the shower one time where you felt like someone had touched your hair or something.
Something pushed me under the faucet. It was bad. I was trying to bend over I think I had just colored my hair or something, and I was washing my hair out in the bathtub and just washing it out, and something pushed my head down really hard under the faucet. It hurt. I mean, it was like a really hard push.
And I mean, I think that we more or less agree that the Lady in the Closet probably wasn't an evil figure. Do you think that was the Lady in the Closet or just something different entirely?
I would think it was something different entirely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because my sort of conclusion I reached, the sort of conclusion that I reached was that I don't think the Lady in the Closet was anything evil. I don't. And I suppose actually one final thing. I think that a lot of people in our family, my grandmom, and you even, I think the Lady in the Closet was my great-grandmother who passed right before I was born. Do you still think that's the case, or do you think it's something different?
I do think that might have something to do with it. Because, I mean, she told you she loved you a lot, and that she was proud of what you were doing, or little things like that, so yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is, I think my conclusion, and it seems your conclusion, is it wasn't anything evil. But, alright, I think that's the end. Thank you. Love you, Mom.
I love you too. This has been weird. This has been weird.
Why has it been weird?
I don't know. It's just weird. But anyway.
I am sitting here interviewing my mom. So, yeah, that's the end. Thank you, Mom. Bye.
Okay, Olivia, this is the most dense interview I think we have. This is also our second time recording a discussion portion for this because I didn't like how I sounded in the first one. Oh, what do you think? What do you think of this whole story? How are you about ghosts and grandmas and all that kind of stuff?
Pretty neutral on ghosts and grandmas, but there is a lot to this one. It's bulky, for sure.
You're going to get a substantial amount of hate for being neutral about grandmas, but so...
I don't know them all.
So this story has a lot of the classic haunting stuff that we are going to be talking about a lot throughout this series, and it also has a lot of the, I guess, signs of one of these sort of, I guess, accidentally manifested hauntings. So, for example, this ghost, or whatever we want to call it, it starts off as just a voice, and then it seems to me like the more that Eccentric is engaging with it, the more real it becomes. It starts being more visible. He starts seeing it all over the house. That's showing up in the corner of the room during the sleep paralysis stuff and that kind of thing later on. And then the other thing that I want people to take note of for next week's episode, especially because we're really going to get into my sort of deeper theories about all this stuff in episode 3. I wanted episode 1 and 2 to just kind of be like pretty easygoing ghost stories before we get into the really wild stuff. The other thing that fits into sort of the broader themes of the series is that this gets, at first it's kind of neutral and he's not really scared of it because he doesn't really have any context for it. But then once he goes through kind of a traumatizing part of his life or an upsetting part of his life and starts to think of this thing as negative and starts to get deep into Christianity and deep into this idea that all of these things are demonic, it immediately starts getting worse. It not only does he start being scared of it, but the phenomenon itself like kind of starts to get a little bit more scary. And then you get trapped in this loop where you're already upset about something in the first place. You start thinking about this thing as a negative. It starts getting scary because you're scared all the time. Your anxiety spikes. Now you are paranoid and you're constantly looking for paranormal stuff. And then it turns into one of these like paranoid thought loops that we talked about, I think, in episode 1, where you start not being able to tell the difference between what's paranormal and what's not. To that effect, though, I do think it's really interesting in this story that there are multiple, I guess, beings that he talks about. And 2 of them seem to be exclusive to the sleep paralysis. But this woman with the voice that he's hearing all the time isn't. Like, she shows up sometimes in the sleep paralysis, but also is the only thing that shows up outside of it. Which, to me, seems a signal that there's something else going on with that one specifically. Because if this was just a sleep paralysis story, I wouldn't have ran with it. So, we know that sleep paralysis gets worse if you're anxious and stressed out. So that's a perfect example. You get stressed out about this other thing that you're seeing all the time. Then you start having sleep paralysis. You start seeing more of them. You have no way of telling, like, your whole reality starts to feel like it's falling apart because you're seeing stuff when you're awake and you're seeing stuff when you're asleep. You can't, and I could see how this would, like, drive some people crazy if they didn't resolve it somehow. The other thing that's interesting here that I think is going to tie into next week's episode is this idea of the great-grandma, because a lot of people in the family seem to think that that is who this being is, which is why it's saying I love you all the time. It seems to have like a motherly presence. And the great-grandma was in the house and knew that his mom was pregnant before she died. And we are going to talk about this a lot next week, so I don't want to really hammer on it too much right here, but I will say a little bit of a primer. I don't think ghosts are dead people. I think they are sort of a memory of those people that is imposed onto reality. So when you have a story like this, where you've got a great-grandma who's probably really excited about seeing like another generation of her family and knows that somebody's pregnant and then dies being kind of disappointed that she wasn't going to see this new baby, that creates, I would imagine, that's probably like a pretty frustrating way to die, of being like, man, I couldn't make it just like 2 more months. And I think those kinds of powerful emotions that are involved with deaths and tragedies can sort of imprint a memory onto the surrounding environment. And I don't think they are technically literally the consciousness of dead people that are walking around. And some people are really averse to that idea because they like the idea that their dead family members are like walking around interacting with them. And right now, I'm not going to get into the specifics because, like I said, next week is an entire, like, almost 2-hour-long episode, I think, that is dedicated to talking about a lot of that specifically. But what I will say is that it's a lot more complicated than ghosts just being dead spirits walking around. And I'm not going to sort of take the angle that you think I am going to take on that, because a lot of people will say, oh, ghosts aren't dead people, so as to, like, invalidate the entire idea. A lot of it is done for good reason, like, for example, with psychics trying to claim that, oh, we can contact your dead relatives if you pay us $75. So there's an undercurrent in the paranormal community to kind of get away from this idea because it enables scams. I am just getting away from this idea because I don't think it makes very much sense, and there is a much better, more complex explanation for it that still allows for this idea that you could potentially be accessing information from people that have died. Then in the second part of this interview, we have the very good interview with Eccentric's mom, who seems like a very nice lady. And a lot of stuff kind of gets revealed here. So the fact that there was like shadow figures in the house that both parents were seeing before Eccentric even sort of like activates and starts seeing and interacting with this thing as a kid, that kind of tells me that this was here probably the entire time, because they just sort of move in and start seeing stuff immediately. And his mom is talking about how scary it was and how she would like literally sleep with him in the living room and stuff. And so there's just so much going on here, it's hard to hand wave away, where you have three people that are all describing the same thing. They all can corroborate it, where his mom is like, yeah, I saw you like talking to this thing. I remember you getting up in the middle of the night and saying that it was talking to you. I remember you talking about this and that. I saw it. Your dad saw it. Your big, tough, scary Marine uncle saw it and got so scared that he never came back to the house. So it just seems like there's no possible way where this could be some kind of hallucination or completely fabricated story when you've got so many people tangential to it that are seeing, like the uncle one especially, like he has really nothing to do with the broader story going on here and only came to the house one time. So in that specific example, you can't even say that, oh, well, he was coming over and getting indoctrinated into the ghost story, and then he was freaked out and went down into the basement and jumped at a shadow, and now he won't come back. Like you can't even really use that sort of traditional example for this one. Another thing that's really interesting about this one is that it seems to follow him around to different apartments and stuff that he's lived in over the course of his life, which is something that you see a lot. There's this idea that the ghost isn't really haunting a house, it's haunting the people in the house. And some people will take that and run with it and be like, oh, well, yeah, that's because you're making it up. It's all like in your head. And something that I want to impress on people that, again, sorry to keep doing this, but episode 3 is a big one that we'll be talking about more next week, is this idea that, yes, it is all in your head, but that does not make it any less quote unquote real. Like I think people are very confused as to the extent to which you actually are able to tell as a human being what is real and what isn't. And that's another big theme for this show and also episode 3. Okay, we probably don't need to go into that much discussion in this episode. This was a very long, very dense interview. A lot of it speaks for itself. Definitely show up next week. That's going to be a big one. It's going to be very important for the show going forward. And a lot of what we could sort of say about this episode is going to be said in that one. So for now, I hope you enjoyed this series of interviews. Big thank you to Eccentric and his mom for doing interviews. This is probably one of my favorite episodes in the series just because of how much is here, how much stuff is corroborated between multiple people, how much of it fits in with both my sort of theories on all this stuff and also the broader theories from all of the people that I actually respect that look into this stuff. And we will see you in the outro section. Hello again, and thank you for listening to episode 2 of Deep Weird. I don't really have a whole lot to tack on at the end of this episode, other than I will give you one final, very annoying reminder. Next week's episode, episode 3, is the episode. If you are listening to this out of order, if you got sent this episode and you don't even know what this show is, and it's a year from now, and we've completed this season and hopefully maybe a couple other seasons, go back and listen to episode 3 right now. Or I guess go forward and listen to episode 3 right now. Do not listen to anything else before that one. It is one of the cornerstones of the series. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to share for the show, please email us at deep.weird deepweird@gmail.com. We are always looking for more submissions. If you have enjoyed these last couple episodes, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you can. That is one of the most important ways that you can help out the show. If you want to follow us online, we are on Twitter @DeepWeirdPod. There is also an active Discord community that you can join. That link will probably be on my Twitter. It will probably be in the podcast descriptions. If you go to my old YouTube channel, probably Jacob, you can find it in the description of almost every video. If you want to be in the Discord, it is not hard to find the Discord. And obviously, if you would like to support us a little bit more directly, you can head over to the Deep Weird Patreon. But the most important thing you can do is share the show, get more people in here, get more people that are willing to share their stories, and just help grow the show organically. Deep Weird is written and produced by me, Jacob Pittman, and the awesome music that you have heard tonight was produced by Griffin Dodefray. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.